Back to Miller. Oh my goodness.
Herbert.
Sidearm sling, and it's a touchdown.
Tyrese Maxey.
Oh, good spin move by Filipowski for the news. Give him 9.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Beef Upfront podcast here on Pick Swap Media. This year is Ryan Coyle, continuing on today with our college football preview series. We'll be hitting on a bunch of the top teams nationally and kind of doing some individualized 15-minute episodes on these teams. A little recap from last season, what to expect this season, and then their eventual schedule prediction and where I have them shaken out by season's end. So today's episode will be one of the two big-name teams that is playing in Week 0. We already covered Notre Dame. Today's episode will be USC, who comes into 2023 ranked number 6 in the AP poll. Last year, 2022, their first year under new head coach Lincoln Riley after he came from Oklahoma. He went 11-3 in his first year at USC, led them to a Pac-12 title berth where they lost to Utah, but it was an amazing turnaround in his first year after he took over a team where the year before they went 4-8. But he did bring Caleb Williams with him when he came from Oklahoma. That was the biggest transfer last year on the market. He went with Lincoln Riley to USC and now won the Heisman Trophy, and now they're coming into this season as the number 6 team in the country, and pretty lofty expectations for this bunch. The last year in the Pac-12, next year they'll be going to the Big Ten, where they'll have to compete with the likes of Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State from now on to win national titles. So this is definitely the easiest path that USC has to win a national title, and expectations are, I think, to be the best team in the Pac-12 and to make the playoff. I think national title might be a little bit unrealistic, but entering year 2 as number 6 overall in the country after taking over a team 2 years ago in 2022 that was 4-8 is a pretty quick turnaround. Quick note on Lincoln Riley, though, and his tenure as a head coach. Every year at Oklahoma and his 1 year at USC, he has lost at least 2 games. So this does include the college football playoff and conference championship, but we do kind of see Lincoln Riley's team struggle a little bit down the stretch. We didn't see them get over the hump in the playoff at Oklahoma. We saw him last year in the Pac-12 title game, albeit Caleb Williams did hurt his hamstring in that game. So they got out to a hot start and he hurt his hamstring, but the defense still kind of imploded. And then they lost last year in the Cotton Bowl to Tulane. So down the stretch, this team kind of fatigues a little bit. Let's see if they can flip that this year and potentially get to that college football playoff. But like I said, huge expectations for year 2 for Lincoln Riley, and maybe the best chance that they have to go to the national title, because this is Caleb Williams last year, 99% chance at USC before he goes to the NFL. So whoever will be playing quarterback next year will be a downgrade. But USC's over-under on DraftKings is at 10 on the dot, so no half there. The over is at plus 100 and the under is minus 120. Lofty expectations for this bunch, and the favorite to win the Pac-12. They're plus 195 to win the Pac-12. Those are the best odds in the conference, and they're also plus 250 to make the playoffs and plus 1,500 to win the national championship, which are the 6 best odds. So when you look at last year's team, the key losses from that bunch: wide receiver Jordan Addison, he transferred in from Pitt. He had a really nice year with Caleb Williams, wound up being a first-round pick to the Vikings. Defensive lineman Tui Talalupu, or however you pronounce his last name, he was one of their better defensive players for a unit that was one of the worst kind of defensive units in the Power 5 last year. He went to the Chargers in the second round. And then cornerback Mekhi Blackman and offensive guard Andrew Voorhees were also 2 mid-round picks by this USC team from last year that went to the NFL draft. So didn't really have many guys transfer out. Their leading rusher, Travis Dye, went undrafted, I believe, in the draft. So he's out the door as well. But when you look at this team, it's really all going to surround number 13, the guy who plays quarterback, Caleb Williams. The reigning Heisman winner, he's the favorite to win it again this year at plus 550. If Caleb Williams does win the Heisman this year, he would be the first player to win it back-to-back since Archie Griffin did in 1974 and 1975. So pretty high expectations for him. At plus 550, the closest to him is like plus 1,100 Jaden Daniels right now, I believe. So he's the overwhelming favorite and the likely heavy number 1 overall pick heading into next year's draft, being compared to Patrick Mahomes. So this guy really is as good as it gets. And as well as he plays and as healthy as he's able to stay will most likely decide how well the Trojans play this season and if they're able to reach those expectations of at least making it to the college football playoff. I think that's kind of the buzz around Los Angeles and around the country, that this team should be headed to the playoffs with a guy like Caleb Williams, who's that good. But I have a little bit of hesitancy myself with proclaiming them as that team this year. But Caleb Williams, in his third year now in Lincoln Riley's system, and his 1 year at Oklahoma and then 2 years at USC now, his numbers last year were 42 passing touchdowns and 4,537 passing yards. So a star-studded season, and he's really able to use his legs as well, really effective on the ground. This offense did lose Jordan Addison, as we touched on. He was Caleb Williams' number one target last year, but they went out and added one of the top wide receivers in the portal from last year, a guy who went over 1,000 yards, and that's Dorian Singer from Arizona. He's expected to be the go-to guy, and then a couple of five-star freshmen are supposed to be playing some pretty significant roles and snaps from the beginning. Five-star receiver Zachariah Branch and five-star tight end Deuce Robinson are going to be two guys that are counted on for major roles from the jump. And then you look at a trio of guys that contributed last year for Caleb Williams, in Mario Williams, Brendan Rice, and Taj Washington. Those are guys that are established within the offense, and they're also going to be counted on for major roles for USC this year. And then you look at the backfield on this team, as I touched on, Caleb Williams, a real good player with his legs. They're not going to be too many design runs for him because you want to keep him healthy, but he's like Mahomes in the sense where, all right, it's 3rd and 7. Coverage is tight downfield. I'm going to take off and run, and I'm able to get 9. He's able to use his legs when he wants, but he is looking to beat you with his arm more times than not. They have a deep backfield, about 6 guys that could play some snaps from what I've heard. Most likely is going to be like a 3 or 4 man rotation, but keep an eye out on South Carolina transfer running back Marshawn Lloyd to get a lot of the touches on this offense. And then the offensive line returns a few starters, as well as bringing in transfers Michael Tarkin at tackle and Jared Kingston at guard. Both of those guys are expected to start right away. But with Williams, Caleb Williams, the offensive line, I think is kind of the least of your worries with this offense, just because he ad-libs and finds ways to create by himself so much. He's kind of just out there like playing pickup or playing in the park. That's what he plays football like. So he's not going to be a guy just sitting in the pocket and needing a clean pocket to throw. He's going to be running around no matter what. So the offensive line, as long as they're serviceable and obviously keeping them upright, that's the main thing. But they don't need an elite group in front of Caleb Williams because he does a lot of his damage outside the pocket. As long as number 13 is healthy and under center, the offense is going to produce, and they might even be better with Caleb Williams now going into his 3rd year of college football. And those are pretty high expectations to pass because last year the offense averaged 41.3 points per game, and that was 3rd best in the country. So offensively, that's the bread and butter of this team. When you get into the defense, that's where the hiccups start to come in and the worries of this team from potentially reaching those goals. Their defense last year was the major downfall of the team, and the main reason they imploded in both the Pac-12 title game and against in the Cotton Bowl against Utah and Tulane. They allowed 93 points combined in those 2 games. And over the course of this season, the USC defense ranked 93rd in scoring, 79th in rushing defense, 111th in passing defense, and 105th in total defense. So a lackluster group, to say the least, by defensive coordinator Alex Grinch. He was brought back for a 2nd year. But I think you do have to keep in mind, USC's defensive numbers will never be great just because of the offensive system that Lincoln Riley runs. All the snaps that they do, all the tempo that they're on. This defense is on the field kind of more often than most other teams in the country. So they're going to be exposed for a lot of plays and a lot of snaps. And that's one of the main reasons I think the team does fatigue down the stretch and kind of struggle. One of the things that Lincoln Riley might have to change up, and it sounds like he's been putting a more of a major emphasis on the defense this offseason. So this is a team that's at a disadvantage most nights on the defensive end. But can they just be good enough to let the offense win the games? Can they just, all right, we're setting a goal tonight, no more than 31 points. We know Caleb's going to be able to go out there and get us 35 points. That's what we feel like we need to win. The defense just needs to be sustainable enough. We're not asking for the 1985 Chicago Bears and pitching shutouts or allowing only 10 points a game, something like that. They just need to be good enough to allow Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley to create some offensive magic to help them get those wins. But I am kind of worried when they play, potentially, if they do get to the playoffs, some of the big boys like Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, they're going to be more physical and not really let the finesse and soft kind of style of play that USC runs to allow them to win. So when you look at this defense, that's where the major question mark lies on this team. Lincoln Riley hit the portal though really hard, especially up front. He picked up 3 guys who are likely starters on the defensive line in Bear Alexander from Georgia, Kyan Barnes from Arizona, and then Jack Sullivan from Purdue. And then when you look at the secondary, though, that's a major worrisome spot. As we touched on, they lost Mekhi Blackman to the draft, and they didn't really do that much to improve this unit. And especially when you have to face quarterbacks like Cam Rising, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Sam Hartman, and potentially UCLA freshman Dante Moore, seeing if he gets playing time his freshman year. A lot of dynamic guys at the quarterback spot. When your secondary is a worrisome unit, that's a major kind of red flag. So, like I said, Lincoln Riley hit the portal really hard. He brought in a lot of guys, and I think we could see more than half of this defense be new faces from last year and guys that did just come in this offseason in the transfer portal. So it's going to take some time, I think, to build some chemistry. Let's see if they're able to do that. But if the talent meshes enough to become a unit that is just good enough to allow the offense to win games, I think that should be the goal for this team. But I am very worried about this defense, and I think that's the main reason that you can't put them on that national title type pedestal right now. When we go to my schedule prediction for this team, give me 1 second while I share my screen. I have the USC Trojans this year going 10-2, a little bit of I guess not really a step back after going 11-3 year one, but as we've touched on throughout the episode so far, a team that has national title expectations. I have them getting off to a hot start against a very, very friendly schedule to be in the year. As we touched on, they play in week 0 against San Jose State. Give them a win there. Give them a win against Nevada. Stanford might be like a 1-11, 0-12 team this year. They might be the worst team in the Power 5. Arizona State's in a rebuild as well. First-year head coach down there, another win. Dion in Colorado in a rebuild. Arizona got better last year, but that still should be a win. So they should coast out to a nice 6-0 start. Then you look over the second half of the season, the schedule for this team is just brutal. At Notre Dame, I have that as an L. Going to Notre Dame, I think, is going to be tough, and I think Marcus Freeman and his defense are going to come to play this year, and is going to be Notre Dame's going to be one of my surprise teams this season. Utah beat them twice last year. I do have them winning this game, though, getting some revenge. At Cal, that should be an easy win. Washington, going to be a tough game. They're number 10 in the country to start the year. Michael Penix Jr., one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country. That's going to be a high-scoring game. That one might be the game where, all right, the defense, we're not setting a goal of only allowing X amount of points in this one. Let's just see Caleb Williams and Michael Penix go out there, and it could be who has the ball last, 56, 53 type game, something like that. I have them losing at Oregon. I think Bo Nix, another year under his belt. I think Oregon's going to be really good. They're my team out of the Pac-12 this year. And then I do have them beating UCLA in the last game between these two teams while they're Pac-12 rivals before they go to the Big Ten. So you have them at 10-2 there with one conference loss, so they could still be in position depending on how the rest of the schedule and their opponents shake out in the Pac-12 standings, because that one loss against Notre Dame is a non-league game. So they could make it back to the Pac-12 championship game eventually. But I do think national title expectations are a little too high for this bunch. So their win total, as we touched on at the beginning, is set at 10 on the dot. I see 5 games potentially on the schedule with Notre Dame, Utah, Washington, Oregon, and then we'll see the development and potential play of Dante Moore at UCLA. But if he's as good as advertised or what we've been hearing about him, that's 5 games on the schedule that I could see going either way where USC would lose. So I'm going to lean on the under there for this one. 2 of those big games are on the road as well, with Notre Dame and Oregon, 2 teams that have very experienced quarterbacks, and they're going to be waiting for USC in that one. I just think they got too many things going against them. They're going to get out to such a hot start. It wouldn't surprise me to see them number 1 or number 2 in the country after a few weeks, and they're going to be putting up a lot of points. They're going to be the big flashy team. But then down the stretch, that second half of their schedule is tough. It's Murderers Row. The only real cupcake game in there is Cal. So I don't think USC is going to quite live up to this hype that the national media and especially out on the West Coast is getting built up to be. But I still think it's going to be a nice year. And I'm also not going to pick Caleb Williams to win the Heisman, as we touched on a few times. 74-75 was the last time a player won back-to-back Heisman trophies. It's nearly impossible to do. We saw, Tim Tebow, Lamar Jackson, Johnny Manziel, all these guys come in as the favorite after winning it the year before. They're unable to kind of replicate that success. So no Caleb Williams for the Heisman, no USC to the college football playoff in my book, no national title for USC. So some might say this is an underachieving, less than expectations type season, but I just think there's too many flaws still on the defense. And until I see it to believe it, I'm not going to trust this team down the stretch. As I said, Lincoln Riley has lost at least 2 games every single season. That's not cutting it. That's not winning the national title. He's going to have a fun and explosive group to watch each and every week. But come December, come January, when you need to play the big boy football, I don't think USC is quite there yet. So that'll do it for this episode of the Beef Upfront podcast here on Pig Swap Media. As always, thank you everyone for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk soon.